My goal is to move around to like 3 different places to work at today.
Yeah.
And I've made it to 2.
All right. Good morning, Chair Postman, members, Garrett Vollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open. Recording has begun.
Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the board caucus meeting for Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. I'm excited about today's caucus. We're going to do a research deep dive and got a couple of items. The first is to look at the Whitney economics report and talk a little bit about that. This was something that was done in conjunction with the social equity rulemaking. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Sarah Oki, the research program manager, and you can sort of take us through the agenda, if you will.
Yes, great. So, hello, nice to see everyone. Before I begin, I do just want to acknowledge that my voice is a little bit rough today. So thank you for bearing with me as we go through 2 different presentations. The first is an overview of the Whitney economics report, and the second is an overview of some other program updates that we've recently uploaded onto our website. So I will go ahead and share my screen for the Whitney economics presentation. Okay, and if people cannot see that, please let me know.
Good.
Great. Okay. So this presentation is a brief overview on the Whitney economics report. As a background, we contracted with Whitney Economics earlier this year to better understand the economic forecast of cannabis retail, producer, and processor licenses through 2032. This contract was in part due to help with rulemaking related to the social equity in cannabis program. So the legislator asked us to adopt rules establishing a threshold of the number of licenses that could be located in each county. We initially spent a lot of time thinking about ways to calculate the number of retail, producer, and processor licenses by county, but all of our options that we were bringing to the table seemed to not fully capture the complexities of the cannabis landscape. And we really wanted to appreciate those complexities and get a better understanding of market viability across time for these different license types. So we decided it was best to contract with someone who has the relevant expertise and background in this area to conduct an economic analysis of cannabis license viability. And this is where we found Bo Whitney from Whitney Economics. Whitney Economics describes themselves as building data-driven economic models for the cannabis industry with a mission of using sound analytic principles and valid data to provide insights and recommendations. In addition to his expertise, he was able to conduct the analyses we asked of him within our specified rulemaking timeline. So we worked with him for about 5 months, starting in January and ending in late May, as he developed an independent report. Okay, so this full report is about 75 pages long, and it has already been uploaded onto our website. And then for those who are looking at the schedule today, the PDF has this direct link that can be taken to where that is. Today I will go over a super brief overview of this main findings. This report is long and somewhat technical, and I won't be able to describe everything in depth today. In addition to the full report, the research program additionally developed key takeaways and includes a brief overview similar to what I'll be covering today. So before beginning, I do want to note that the report is independent and does not reflect an official statement from LCB. This was produced by Whitney Economics. And today I will overview the methodology and main findings for the retail, producer, and processor 2032 forecast. These analyses are estimating the amount of licenses that may be economically viable or successful in 2032. Okay, so I'll begin with retail licenses. In order to determine total retail licenses that may be viable by 2032, Whitney considered various factors, such as the amount of estimated legal participation, total revenue, and demand. Because Whitney is an economist, many of these estimates he used were those commonly used in economy. So for example, to determine future sales forecast, he estimated the total addressable market, which is a combination of the number of consumers based on a population, such as the state or county, and a potential per capita consumption amount. Part of this analysis additionally included a calculation of the minimum amount of revenue a retailer needs in order to cover all of its expenses and taxes in a given year. Whitney estimated that a retailer needs, on average, $2.5 million to remain healthy and viable. And there are many factors that went into this calculation. So for example, he estimated average wages in an area, labor costs, product acquisition costs, taxes, healthcare expenditures, rental rates, property insurance, debt service, license fees. There were a lot of different factors. Notably, this estimated 2.5 million is the amount needed to remain viable and healthy. And to clarify what this means, Whitney Economics wrote in the report that this does not mean to imply that if a business generates revenue below this threshold, they will immediately go out of business. However, the farther below this level of revenue, the greater the propensity for business failure, diversion, and products of other illicit activities. So after taking into account all of these factors, Whitney found that by 2032, 634 retail licenses may be economically viable across Washington. So this means there are economic opportunities for increased retail licensure in the foreseeable future, given this estimate is 160 plus more than currently allocated. I do want to mention Whitney additionally ran a more stringent model using a lower economic threshold of viability. So instead of using the 2.5 million as the threshold, he also ran another analysis using 1.6 million as a threshold, because some smaller operators or those in rural parts may require less labor. If you look at the higher estimate, then 1,095 retail licenses across the state may be viable in 2032. Now, Whitney did not recommend using this estimate unless looking at more rural places, but it is provided across the state and for each county. And today I'm mostly focusing on statewide analyses. However, the county level estimates are provided and you can find those online. So now I will move on to the producer license analyses and the forecasted economic viability of producers through 2032. The forecast considered various factors such as total capacity of existing producers and cultivated output needed to meet supply. This was a unique analysis relative to the retail or processor analyses because it did not specify the number of producers specifically. And this is because producers have a lot of variability in their output capacity depending on the grow type, such as indoor or outdoor and tier level. Because of this variability, Whitney provided the estimated demand across time and compared that to the total output capacity of current producers. So overall, Whitney found that producers right now have the capacity to supply more cannabis than demand. Current supply capacity in pounds is estimated at 2.6 million, and estimated demand in pounds for 2032 is 890,000. Now, it is important to note that this estimate is if all producers are at 100% capacity utilization. Data suggests that producers on average use about 50% utilization, and producers have the ability to modulate their supply to market conditions. However, Whitney found that if producers were to use 100% of their current capacity, there would be greater supply than demand. Now, again, because the legislator called out county estimates, Whitney additionally did analyses for each county. But I really want to caution the use of these county level estimates. Producers are not public facing. Products are easily transported, and that makes estimating producers by counties difficult and not as reliable. Okay, and then moving on to the last analysis. Whitney examined processor license viability through 2032. This analysis used estimates based on prior research conducted by Whitney Economics. In this prior research, he examined the amount of raw material needed in order for a processor to generate a profitable and viable business. He found that 250 to 500 pounds of biomass is needed per year. These lower and higher estimates assumes that for every pound of flour, there is raw material biomass and usable THC. This processor analysis was considered more simple for a number of reasons. Whitney stated in this report, the only real limit to support consumer demand is the availability of raw plant material, and businesses do not need a lot of raw material to make a product. And in the report, he discusses that processor licenses have more stable prices and predictable revenues and are not as dependent on scale. So Whitney's analysis found that processors are considered the largest opportunity in the cannabis market. He estimated that there will be between 1,780 and 3,340 processor licenses that may be viable in 2032. As a comparison, there is currently less than 1,100 licensed today. Again, county estimates are provided online, similar to the producer estimates. I do want to caution the use of these processors like producers. They're not public facing, and products are easily transported, and they are transported easily across county lines. Okay, so now before I go into a high-level discussion or a high-level summary and then open it up for discussion, I do want to caution some aspects of this study. As with any analysis, there are always limitations, and it's important to interpret findings with caution. And I really want to emphasize that. Please interpret these findings with caution. And I have 5 limitations that I'll just quickly go over. So first, these are estimates only, and these estimates use averages to calculate potential viability. There is no calculation to determine the number of specific licenses that will definitely be able to operate successfully across time. The landscape is too nuanced, it's too complex to ever be able to do that. And this industry is also constantly evolving. I know I'm preaching to the choir, depending on potential federal changes, interstate commerce, etc., future changes may and will impact these estimates. Second, again, these estimates are based on averages. Each license and business has unique factors and circumstances that will change the extent to which they may be successful. For example, 2 businesses may have different rental rates or different number of employees, and this will determine the level of revenue needed to be successful. Location also matters. For example, this analysis did not take into account bans and moratoriums, and this then may impact legal participation and ability for a business to succeed. Third, this analysis examined producers and processors separately, but we also know that most licenses have both processors and producer licenses concurrently, and these combined license types may have unique factors that determine the overall success not accounted for in these findings. Fourth, data sources vary, and everything is an estimate. This analysis used estimates that are commonly used in economics because this was an economic report. Depending on what data source you're pulling from, different findings may emerge. So for example, determining legal market participation versus illicit market participation is difficult to measure. Depending on the source, there are different estimates for this. In this analysis, Whitney used a common economic measure to calculate this. And then finally, this analysis focuses on the economic health of cannabis licenses, which is important because at LCB, we want our licenses to be healthy and successful within the current landscape. I do just want to acknowledge, though, that to different stakeholders, findings may mean different things. So, for example, the finding that there is ample growth opportunity for processor licenses is a positive outlook for those who are interested in becoming involved in this space. The public health and prevention community, however, may be wary of leaning into the growing processor market, especially with concerns related to processed products and those with higher concentration THC. This is just one example. Another concern that was mentioned was might be related to further increasing retail outlet density. Nevertheless, this does provide a snapshot into the cannabis market in the future. So to conclude with a super high-level summary, this was an independent report by Whitney Economics. This independent report found that for retail licenses, there is some economic opportunity through 2032. There is limited economic opportunity for producer licenses, and newer operators may have difficulty being successful because current licenses already have the ability to produce more supply than demand. And in contrast, because of this high supply, there is great opportunity for processor licenses. We do know that processed products are increasing in popularity. And then finally, this analysis does not conclude that any one license will or will not be able to be successful. Rather, this is one of many tools that can help provide informed decision-making. So again, the full report and our key takeaways can be found on the research program website, and also this link for anybody accessing the PDF of these slides. I will now open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry you have to do this when you're not feeling well. Questions for Sarah, comments from the board first on this?
This is
Go ahead, Ollie.
no, I was just gonna say, Sarah, I think this was great information. And it's eye-opening because it really is showing us a different picture than we thought. So great information.
Thank you.
Jim?
So I too wanted to thank you for the overview. It's very complex information. Makes me think, and this is a whole different conversation about maybe having an economist on board. That's, again, a whole different conversation to have. But I have a couple of questions. One is, and I haven't read the entire report, but the 2.5 million needed to remain viable and healthy. I'm assuming that's an average. And in the report, is there a section that shows what by county or by region at all, what that dollar amount? Because I imagine it's much higher in King County, for example, versus Ferry County. And so just wondering if that level of detail is in the report regarding the 2.5 million needed for viability and healthy operations.
Yes, I don't know what page, but but he does go into more specific. So I can look at that and I'll kind of send you to direct you to what page he breaks that out. I agree, Jim, that this is a very technical and complicated report, but I also think it's important for this type of analysis because there are so many factors that play a role in this analysis to be able to forecast this. But yes, so the 2.5 is the average, and one of the reasons why we asked him to do kind of that lower threshold of economic viability is because there is such variability depending on where someone is located.
Okay. My second question is around some of the limitations, and I appreciate the list that you went through. But one other limitation that I am wondering about, and wondering if it was also highlighted in the report, is the evolving nature of the business itself. We don't know what new products, we don't know what new innovations, there's so many uncertainties in an industry that's so young. Was that touched upon in the report at all?
I am not sure to what extent that particularly was touched on, but I do think that that finding that there are so many opportunities for processors kind of taps into a little bit of what you're
That's a
saying,
good point. Yeah.
because processors really have that space to be super innovative about what different products are going to be emerging onto the market in the future.
Yeah,
Great. Well, thank you. Excellent job. I really appreciate the overview.
Thank you.
They do make one other mention, but they're just talking in general about as the industry's evolved over the past 10 years. It's now important for the regulatory structure to evolve as well. And that, developing a regulatory program in a nascent market's never easy. And they sort of make that point about what's happened over the time. And even though I know we have all those qualifications, I do want to say I also saw what I like about it is the part that says they think the LCB's done a pretty good job. I really do. I've enjoyed looking at this study since it first came out, because it is a rare independent look at what we do and the health of the industry. But they do say some focus by LCB to establish some guardrails related to the expansion of licenses is required. But overall, the LCB has managed the industry well, especially considering it was the first to legalize. And I think we should take a moment to at least appreciate that. I mean, these guys dug into it in a way that we haven't seen an economic analysis like this. So, but one of the questions I have, and I don't know if maybe Justin or Will want to answer, but one, how do we get this to the legislature? Or have we shared it with legislators? And two, if you go back and look at 5080, I sort of wish we had some of this data before the bill, because the bill sets our thresholds overall statewide, not the concentrations per county, but says we can have up to 52 retail, 100 processor, and 10 producers. Maybe if you'd seen this, if you were us or the legislature, you would have come up with different numbers in there. So that's one of the things I just wonder is, the task they had was to help us with this question of concentration and what other descriptors you want to use for that. But they really look at the overall capacity, which I'm not sure is in our authority today. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Like, what would have to happen if we saw something that's sort of said, well, we should weigh this more than that? Yeah, I think that's worth looking at. And I think we need to make sure that we do share this with legislators. I think it's important for applicants as well. I'll save some questions for another day. We can talk about it, Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you. Justin, I saw that you came on video. I just want to provide the opportunity before the next topic.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So as far as authority, of course, we've got some pretty broad rulemaking authority on a number of issues. And I think one of the pieces in the legislation that drove this particular study was the concept of threshold. And so threshold didn't mean necessarily the caps. And so we took a look at that also from a minimum type of stance. And so that's why the analysis looked at this broad spectrum instead of just focusing on the maximum, because there's no way we can guarantee that there's any viability. But of course, as a new business owner coming in, if you have an excellent business plan, you might be more efficient or effective than other folks that currently hold licenses. So it's really too difficult to tell on that front. But I did want to address your question around how do we get this in front of the legislature? Of course, we can send messaging over, but they usually have the assembly days coming up, and Mark would probably be more in line with how to strategize getting this on the agenda. But that certainly could be one of the options. They usually ask us for some feedback on what they'd like to see during assembly days.
Yeah, and I don't know that we have to do a work session on it, but I would get it to the committee members at least. I think they'll find it interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is also the research program, but research program updates specifically. And thank you, Tyler, for joining. I'm going to share my screen for this is a much quicker presentation. Okay, and then if anybody can't see that, please let me know. Okay, so Tyler and I are going to present on some research program updates that have recently been uploaded onto our website. So I'm going to provide a quick update on our standard operating procedures for various deliverables, and Tyler will be doing a quick overview on the first 4 research briefs that have been finalized. Okay, so the research program aims to be a transparent resource focused on public health and safety. In order to be transparent, we wanted to provide our standard operating procedures for our 3 main deliverables: research briefs, research reports, and surveys. Now, this isn't to say that these are the only deliverables that the research program provides. However, within the first year of this program, these were the main internal requests that we have received. So these SOPs are now online on our research program website. Within each of the SOPs, we have outlined general information, such as what we mean when we say, for example, research briefs or research reports, what typically is and is not included in each deliverable, why each deliverable is important, and why it is crucial for the research program to have independent findings. The typical step-by-step process from internal request to board presentation, and as well as the range of time each deliverable might take to complete, and then what the research program does with each deliverable. So I'm not going to go through each of the SOPs today, but I do just want to highlight 4 main themes across all of our deliverables. So, what to and not to expect from deliverables. Please do expect evidence-based and data-driven information. We won't be providing any personal opinions. We will be providing information that either may or may not align with current practices, policies, or rules that LCB has, but we will never be providing any action statements that require, mandate, or imply that LCB will make changes. We may share best practices from scientific literature, takeaways, or interpretations of findings, but we will never be listing off any official position of LCB for these deliverables. And then finally, we are collaborative and we want feedback from different divisions and different subject matter experts, but it is really important that we have independent findings without undue influence. Okay, so now I will let Tyler take the reins to talk about our 4 research briefs.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. So for the research briefs, as Sarah mentioned, this is one of our main categories of products that we are creating, producing, and then posting as the research program. So we have a separate SOP for research briefs, so I'll just talk about them a little bit since we just posted our first 4. So research briefs are really meant to be a short summary of scientific literature, as well as government reports and data, public policies that exist, or might be in existence soon. And really any other credible information sources. So again, they really are a brief summary. And the way that we choose the topics, which again is outlined in the SOP, we really try to address things that are really kind of timely and relevant. Oftentimes these are requests from leadership here at LCB, but it can also be requests from other folks, other divisions here at LCB, or even external partners, if it's something that it would be really helpful to have a summary on, essentially. So again, we kind of outline that process. And as Sarah did a nice job overviewing, again, and we actually have a statement you'll notice right up front. These briefs are not an official position of LCB. It's really just meant to be a summary. This is kind of what's out there. Here's some context about this particular topic. You'll also notice that they're pretty narrow, right? We're not trying to summarize, cannabis use. We're trying to summarize a very specific issue, typically. And the last thing I'll mention is, before I do a brief summary of these four, is that this is an ongoing process. So we've been working on, we've got these four, kind of getting those out there. I think we have a pretty good format template for these, but we've got more in the pipeline. And so we'll be periodically posting these as they get completed. I don't think we have a necessarily a regular interval, but we do have sort of an estimated timeline for how long they take in the SOP. So again, these are the first four. There's more in the works, and I'm sure more will be requested over time. So with that, I'll do a brief overview of these first four, just to kind of give a sense of what was covered and what some of the takeaways were. Next slide, Sarah. So the first one was flavored cannabis vape products. Before I do the summary, just you'll see there's contents of the brief. I guess another point to make is that not every brief is the same. We kind of talked about this as a research program, and we sort of we have similar sections of the brief. You'll notice there's a similar cover page. We usually start with some kind of background, but it kind of depends on the topic. Some lend themselves more to, for example, a policy summary, if that's something that's accessible, that we can find and that we can summarize and, kind of make sense to summarize. So you'll see maybe a section on regulations, and then we tend to end with, one or both of a summary, and as well as best practices, based on looking at the literature, other, oftentimes other state governments. These seem to be, best practices that are out there. Again, we're not taking a position on those best practices. We're just identifying them. And lastly, you'll see that oftentimes we will include Washington State when we do an overview of regulations, just to say kind of here's what Washington State is doing. At least this is kind of what's on the books. Okay, so for flavored cannabis vape, for example, really brief again. These are just posted, and we're happy to answer any questions. Some summary points, again, not all flavoring agents are the same. There's different levels of risk. So for example, there's naturally derived flavoring agents, terpenes, for example, that can come from the cannabis plant or even other plant sources. And then there's sort of synthetic and other natural flavors. So that can be added in as well. So depending on the type of flavoring agent, those kind of have different risks. And we know that these flavored products appeal differently to different demographics. They're more appealing to some, subpopulations than others. And we know that of populations who do choose to vape cannabis, to vaporize cannabis as a mode of administration, half or more are choosing flavored products. So these are pretty prevalent in terms of their availability and their use. And so of course there's appeal in there as well. So they're pretty popular. And with that, again, I won't get into too much detail here. There's there's varied regulations as these different flavors have kind of expanded and maybe become even more available. So you'll see some states are regulating the percentage that can be in the product. Other states are particularly limiting certain types of flavors that we know evidence shows are especially appealing to youth, which I'll get to in the next brief. Things like candy-related flavors, things like that. And yeah, this is really emerging. As I'll also mention that vaping overall has become more popular. So kind of overall prevalence of vaping, especially among adolescents. It's now, based on the most recent surveys, this is now the most popular way of consuming cannabis among adolescents, and it's up there for young adults and adults as well. So again, as this has become more popular as a mode of administration, we've got a lot more products out there as well. So I'll stop there and I'll move on to the next one. Oh, and you'll also notice we often end with more research as a best practice, right? We need to do more research. So I'll just say that now, and then I won't repeat it for everyone. Cannabis packaging and youth appeal. This one I spent a good amount of time on. But again, you'll see a similar outline, similar subtitles there on the contents. So with this one, we know that packaging and labeling elements can appeal to youth. We know this from other types of marketing, other areas of marketing, and they're probably not a surprise to most people, right? Similarity to other products that are popular among youth and adolescents, like candy, for example, other snacks, colorful designs and logos, images of fruit or candy. There's lots of things we know are attractive to youth. And there's been increasing evidence that specifically cannabis packaging and labeling as well. So that's kind of grown as like, we know this from other areas, and now we're increasingly knowing more about it for youth specifically. One area within this is health, what we call health warning labels. We know sort of both broadly for the broad population, as well as youth specifically, there's definitely some best practices with healthcare warnings or health warning labels, sorry. Making the statements stand out, they're separate from other information, making them specific, even specific to adolescent risk. We know there's specific risks to youth and adolescents who consume cannabis products, separate from that of the general population. And so evidence shows that when you do some of these things for the health warning labels, they're more likely to be read. They're more likely to, have the desired impact on populations reading them. So regulations depends on which country and which state you're in, but generally there are specific things that are required. Like you have to have certain health warning labels on your products. They have to cover certain things, and a lot of them. And when we're talking about packaging and labeling, there's a lot of attention on cannabis infused edibles because they tend to have a lot of unique packaging. And so, and they also tend to have the most likeness to other products like candy and snacks. So a lot of the research focuses on that specifically. So I've covered a lot of the best practices, but there's so kind of a combination of the best practices with the actual physical packaging, labeling, and then within that, the health warning labels. I think there's some good takeaways within there. And again, you'll see kind of here's kind of what Washington state regulations have on this particular topic. I think really in particular, we need more research on like the distinction between adolescents and adults. Like, we have, for example, these two labels on here, the 21 plus kind of universal sign, and then the not for kids sign. But are there other things that could be, more differentiating or maybe best practices when we're specifically talking about preventing these products from youth who are underage? All right, next slide, please, Sarah. The third of fourth is alcohol product placement. This one was an interesting one because really there's not a lot of, I think, specific literature, especially on some of these, what I'll call like an emerging topic within alcohol product placement. So we do know things like, certain places where alcohol is placed, again, based on marketing information and research from other products, are really effective to increase sales, right? Market end caps, special displays, things like that. And so the concerns that we have with alcohol products is just increasing. We know that increased exposure to both marketing and just products in general increases likelihood to buy products. And there's certain populations that are more vulnerable, including youth and adolescents. With some of these emerging topics, we are also concerned about accidental purchasing and theft. of products that are easy to access, and maybe are placed in areas that are really convenient for those things to happen, accidental purchasing, or even theft. So those are some of the things we are concerned about. The two populations we are very concerned about is youth who are not of legal age to be buying or otherwise procuring these products, and then those who maybe have a substance use disorder or maybe are in recovery, and having these repeated exposures while in a retail environment. So these one area that's become an increasing concern is crossover or co-branded products, and there's limited research, partly because there's so many on the market now, and they've proliferated so quickly. So these are products that look very similar. They use very similar marketing, labeling, packaging to their non-alcoholic counterparts. We're talking about things like iced teas, sodas, juices, lemonades. And the differentiation is not always very clear. And so we know that, we know that presents a particular risk. And we've even seen a couple of states issue particular guidance and policies to say, like, you need to have special rules for these crossover products because they're so similar to their non-alcoholic counterparts, and so that other states have decided that warrants a specific action there. Again, just summarizing what's being done, and the idea is that this will limit accidental purchases from taking place, or even potentially limiting theft. So I'll leave that there. Again, that one's an interesting one just because it's some of those things like crossover products are so new. So again, further research on best practices needed. And then we'll end with alcohol outlet density. Again, similar breakdown of sections. We know from different types of studies, some more strong than others, that generally speaking, there's a lot of links between you have more alcohol outlet density, you have more alcohol consumption, and this can lead to public health and safety concerns, especially for specific populations who might be disproportionately exposed to alcohol locations. So this one gets really complex because when you talk about something like the physical locations of outlets within neighborhoods, we have differences in the demographic composition of those neighborhoods, individual characteristics, neighborhood characteristics, and then the outlets themselves, right? So it's very different if we're talking about a license that's simply, off-premise versus on-premise, for example, and the different types of establishments. So this one gets complex very, very quickly. But again, we do see that relationship does exist. The greater the density, the greater consumption, especially among concerned populations of concern. So regulation tends to focus on either the licenses or even zoning laws. But most states focus on the licenses because you can limit the number of licenses. Those can be limited based on the population. They can be limited based on a quota, distance, or even just the discretion of the regulatory agency. So we see, for example, in Washington, we have a mix of those. We kind of have a population-based number. There's some discretion, and then when it comes to primary and secondary schools, there's some distance considerations that come into play. So those are some ways that states have created policy and rules around this particular issue. So it would be helpful again to have more collaborative efforts because I think we see that there's probably different needs for different areas, and we have all of these complex relationships when it comes to not just the individuals, but the establishments themselves, and then the neighborhoods that they exist in. So I'll end there. So thank you. Again, these are just posted to our website, both the standard operating procedures, the SOPs that Sarah covered. These first 4 research briefs, they're there to utilize. We're happy to answer questions both right now at a later date. And again, there'll be more of these research briefs being posted at regular intervals, depending on what we get asked and what our priorities are to summarize. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Nice job. Are there questions from the board?
I have several questions. So first of all, thank you. I mean, this is such an excellent example of the work that I envisioned that the research team would be doing. And to see where we're at 1 year later is extremely gratifying and helpful. So first, this is just a generic question I was thinking about as you were talking, is like, who do you envision or how do you envision these reports? Like, who do you envision using these reports and how do you envision people using these reports in general? Just a general question, first of all.
That's a great question. And the reason why we are making these reports non-technical or to the best of our ability, non-technical, is for people to be able to use this as a resource, but are not necessarily, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of research articles, they can be very jargony and complex, and each research article has this tiny little pinpoint of like, of a research question. And oftentimes, if it's covered in the news or if it's covered in an academic sense, there are some of the nuances can get lost essentially. And so I think what we would really love our research briefs to do is to help people understand kind of a broader sense of this topic, but also maintain some type of nuanced perspective within the brief, because research is complicated, research is muddied, and we want to be that transparent, non-biased resource, which is why we also kind of say a lot of what we're going to report, some of it may align with LCB policies and practices, some of it may not, because that's the reality of research. So that's kind of our opinion of it being non-technical for people who don't have the time to kind of go and delve into the scientific literature. These briefs and requests so far have really come from internal. So these are from teams who say, hey, there's this topic that is emerging, or there's something that is kind of percolating that we're not sure kind of what's out there. And so we kind of go out and try to compile it into a report for internal folks at LCB to really have a better understanding of the landscape. And then we're posting it online because our hopes is that there are other state agencies or public health and prevention partners or industry people who are interested in a certain topic are able to have access to kind of these reliable research overviews. Tyler, I
That's
don't know if
great.
you have any. Oh,
go ahead,
No, I think
Tyler.
that was very thorough. I don't have much to add. I think definitely both internal and external. And it does occur to me, as time goes on, we don't intend for this again to be a policy position or anything like that. But I think it will be a reflection of sort of, timely issues that we're having discussions about both internally and with external stakeholders. So we can bring these to, for example, like we're part of multiple statewide working groups or coalitions as well. So it provides a good way to help contribute to those conversations too. It's not just we got this internal request from LCB, and so we're summarizing this topic.
That's great, because I get really excited. I get excited about hearing you guys talk about who the potential partners are. But I love the idea of industry using them. I love the idea of students using them. I love the idea of building this library over time and then revising and updating as we learn new things. So really great information. I'm going to pause because I see that board member Garrett had a question. I want to make sure if it's related to this that you get that chance, Ollie.
Thank you. No, my question is, what are we doing within state government that other agencies are aware of what the work you all are doing and driving them to look at our website for information. I run into a lot of different agencies, people that I talk to, and they tell me something they're looking into or something they're doing. And I go, well, the LCB has already done that. All you need to do is go to our website. Well, the LCB has already done that. Just go to our website. I went through that even with the DIA map, and other agencies were looking at how to do a DIA map. And I'm going, it's been done. So do we do anything within to let the other agencies know?
I think that's a great question. And I honestly think this really makes me think about having a more streamlined communications strategy for getting this more out there. I mean, we and we, meaning the research program, talk all the time about how we get excited about sharing out research, and so I'd love to kind of really brainstorm some ideas for that to get more reach. I do know that we, especially now that we're adding up information on our webpage, we are sharing out kind of our links when we go and sit in at different quarterly meetings or committees that we are a part of. I know Kristen Haley is also a great advocate for posting our information as well. But I think that's a really great point, and I'd love to dig in and think about that more.
Right. And especially with agencies that we know that some folks would have this type of conversation with, uh, let's say Office of Equity, Commerce, different agencies that we know folks from our industry tend to go to for other conversations and bring up this. Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, it would be great if people could even potentially sign up to receive like new research briefs as they're posted, for example. I mean, I love that question, Ollie, because it just really does bring up.
I think Justin has an answer. So do we already send it out to our listserv, Justin?
No, not currently, but again, as you can see, this is 1 year in, and these are like the first tangible deliverables. So
Yeah.
we haven't really had anything
All we gotta do is hit send.
Yeah, to share. We've had some discussions around having an area, and it's not fully formed yet, but around having some sort of separate listserv. So for folks interested in gaining information around these topics or any of the deliverables that we have posted, then they would be able to get some notification. I think from the agency to agency standpoint that Member Garrett was talking about, we do some of that informally right now, whether it's with another agency or for example, we may have Department of Health around the medical cannabis issues, or we'll have something with Department of Agriculture, Commerce, even traffic safety. And so we'll be communicating back and forth. And if there's something that they bring up, that might be something that we ping on and look at exploration. But the other thing about these types of briefs that I wanted to comment on as well is, particularly on the cannabis front, is the national partnerships that we'd like to develop, particularly with some of the other states that have research programs. And so I think that this could offer some additional collaboration, and particularly when we're looking at consistency between states. And so if we can start working with others and sharing these briefs and those types of things, they can identify areas of, hey, did you look at this or that? And same thing from us. And I think that type of alignment will be able to create a lot more awareness around the issues at hand. And so I think that's one of the things that we envision as far as the consumer of this information as well. And also, quite frankly, the legislature. So I mentioned last week at the EMT, we're doing biweekly meetings with legislative staff, and these types of briefs are something that's a nice snapshot that's digestible and that they could look at for members as they're learning about these types of things that members may be asking for.
Great.
Thanks, Justin. All right, Jim, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. So the other thing, I had a question just quickly about the SOPs, and In the list of authors, it makes sense, obviously, that the three of you, the research team, are the primary authors on the vast majority of these. Do you ever envision another content expert within the LCB being an author of these in which you guys are collaborators, or is it intended that the briefs would be strictly coming from the research team as the primary authors?
We've had some discussion about this. We we do really value our subject matter experts within the division, particularly in the topics that we're looking into, because we know we can look into the literature, but we don't really, we need their help to really understand what's happening here at LCB. We've decided that it's unless under another circumstance, in general, it will be the three of us, so Tyler, Nick, and myself, who are the authors. And the primary reason for that, again, is to maintain that independence and not to have this, if someone from this division kind of signed off or wrote on this, what does that necessarily mean in terms of potential policy changes or shifts? But I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
No, I think that you bring up a good point, and that is to make sure we have. And when Kathy Hoffman was here, she and I had multiple conversations about needing to make sure that we keep that very clear and very clean in terms of the autonomy of this group. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But just recognizing that we do have a lot of content experts, and perhaps they can be collaborators on some of these, with you guys being the primary authors, makes sense. I really love the content and the thought that, these are really about helping some of these, depending on the topic area, are about making informed choices. We're not placing value on anything in terms of whether something's good or bad, but there are products that have inherent risks for specific populations. I really deeply appreciate, as a person in recovery, the fact that you call out the challenges of people in recovery in terms of having alcohol content at checkout stands, for example. I mean, I think that that's a really important thing for us to recognize, that we are not only responsible for making sure we keep product out of the hands of youth and young adults, but as a state agency, we have a responsibility for people who also have harmful relationships with these products. The vast majority of people don't have those problems, but for those that do, I think we have a role and responsibility, and I saw that clearly in the alcohol placement one in particular. I also wanted to just say that I am interested in being looped in on the feedback that we get from community members around these briefs, both from the industry side, from all sides. So I just want to put a plug in there for somehow thinking about how to keep me as a board member and other board members who might be interested. I really do want to hear the feedback. I want to hear the feedback that is both critical and the feedback that is supporting our work. I think that'll help shape our future briefs and the work that we do. So please do keep me informed of that.
That sounds good. And yeah, I appreciate it. I'm also very excited to hear about both constructive feedback and supportive feedback, because this is a work in progress. We're 1 year old, and we're developing this out, and we do want to be a resource for many stakeholders.
And I'll just add, we've even considered things like tracking, usage statistics, right? We have, so shout out to Nick on our team, who's would be the one probably summarizing that, but we've talked about different ways to summarize, how much different things get utilized. And then my last comment will be, I do want to thank the subject matter experts at the agency who have contributed, even if it's not like by name, as Sarah mentioned. We do specifically include Kristen Haley, our public health education liaison, as one of the reviewers on 3 of these 4 you'll notice, but there have been several others at the agency who have contributed their expertise and support to these briefs. So thanks to all of those. And they're sort of kind of the unnamed contributors at the moment. So thanks to all of those.
Great. Any other questions for them? No. Okay. Thank you, Sarah, Tyler, Nick, for everything you've done so far. You're only a year old here, but it's a great start. And I've got a bunch of follow-up questions, so I'll find time to talk to you all about that at another time. And with that, then the last thing we have on our agenda is just board member executive assistant reports. Dustin, do you have anything?
Not today. Thank you, Chair.
Anything from the board? No. Okay.
No, Will, you're late for your one-on-one.
Over there. Okay, we'll adjourn. Who doesn't have COVID? Dustin didn't sound